Hi, I'm Marty Gartzman. I'm from the University of Chicago Center for Elementary Mathematics and Science Education, and which is one of the 4 STEM centers at the 4 universities that make up C-STEMEC. I am a science teacher who has had the good fortune of spending the better part of the last 25 years in the world of mathematics, and that's what I'm going to talk about today is mathematics and the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics. Just want to do a quick polling of people in the audience to get a sense who you are. If you are a science teacher, would you raise your hand high? Okay, it's kind of the bulk. If you're a mathematics teacher, raise your hand high. Okay. If you're a school administrator, would you raise your hand high? Okay, you've got a good representation there. Pre-K to 5. 6 through 8, high school. Okay, so we've got pretty good, solid representation all across the map. I'm going to talk about this position paper. Excuse me, higher education. Sorry. Did I leave anyone out? Anyone not in those groups? Okay. So we're going to look at the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics, and actually what we're going to do is we're going to sprint through it, because the assumption is that if you really want to learn about what's in the document, you're going to look at the document. They're pretty easy to read and pretty accessible. What we'll do is we'll highlight some pieces, but in particular I want to call your attention to the last bullet down there, and that is there are a lot of lessons from what's happening in mathematics now that will help us as a science education community do a lot better and be a lot wiser as we begin to implement the new standards in science that Illinois is, we hope, preparing to move forward. Common Core State Standards for Mathematics have lots of consequences for schools and districts. There's more learning for students, lots of different things for teachers, administrators. Now just a year away from different new assessments in mathematics and English language arts. This whole thing is happening quickly. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of moving pieces. And for that reason, it's really critical that people sit down and think about it and try to come up with a aligned, systemic, coherent approach to implementing the standards. We have a series of 6 recommendations, and here they are. Give you a second to look at them. And what we'll do is I'll not actually talk about them. I think I'm going to sprint through them, okay, and highlight 1 or 2 pieces from each of the recommendations. First one is crafting a mathematics-specific strategy. There's something different about mathematics, and there's something different about science. The generic approaches to standards implementation, to curriculum implementation don't apply. So as you begin to think about the Common Core State Standards in mathematics, you have to think about the Common Core State Standards for mathematics. And the strategies you're using for Common Core State Standards for English language arts may not apply as you begin to implement the Common Core State Standards for mathematics. Same thing applies when you begin to think about science. Develop a science-specific strategy as you think about the Common Core in science, or then next generation science standards. Common pitfalls in mathematics. Treating mathematics and English language arts the same. And just looking at the new Common Core State Standards for mathematics as a swap. Moving the Illinois learning standards out, and we're now moving in the Common Core State Standards. There's a lot to be learned that needs to be learned in the Common Core State Standards for mathematics. You need to develop a strategy that allows people time and provides the resources for people to learn about it and figure out the implications for them, their classrooms, and their students. Science, we have the luxury of having a little bit more time. So one of the things you might think about in terms of science is, I think a little bit more about how you develop your capacity to implement the science standards when they come. And Wendy will talk a lot more about this in the next session. Next talk. Use assessments to increase capacity. The Common Core State Standards for Mathematics are all about student learning. And the way you learn about student learning is through good, rich assessments. Good, rich assessments can help give clues to teachers, not only if students are learning big ideas of the standards, but specific ideas of where kids have misconceptions and how to correct them. So use your assessments. A good, rich assessment program will help teachers understand more about their teaching and more about their students' learning. In science, the same thing will happen. One of the pitfalls with assessments is using assessments for purposes for which they weren't designed. We tend to do that with big high-stakes exams, norm referenced exams, try to use them for purposes for which they weren't designed. One of our recommendations is use them for the kinds of things they were designed for, but they weren't designed as formative assessments. Don't think about them in that kind of way. Another big problem in mathematics is trying to throw a lot of things up against the wall and see what sticks. Okay? So we offer a lot of assessments. We do a lot of assessments. We do benchmark assessments. We do high-stakes assessments. We do unit assessments. We do assessments until half the time we're spending in our class is assessing students. Okay? But a lot of the times we're getting the same information from the different assessments. So what you need to do is look at your entire assessment system and design a system where each of the assessments has a very clear purpose and where every one of them adds value to the whole system. The Common Core State Standards for Mathematics is going to require a lot of learning on the part of teachers, on the part of administrators. It's going to require a lot of professional development. One of our recommendations, however, is that generic professional development about standards implementation isn't going to help mathematics teachers understand the implications of the Common Core State Standards for their instruction. We recommend throughout our document that you develop content-specific strategies and tools for your professional development in all areas of the Common Core implementation. And the same thing will hold true for science. You've got to keep the science front and center. It's not about standards implementation, it's about science standards implementation. And science content and the teaching and learning of science should be front and center there as well. One of the real pitfalls we see as people begin to wrestle with the difficulties of implementing new standards is how to go about doing it. And one of the pitfalls is a series of workshops where you spend a lot of time unpacking the standards. That is, what's the structure of the standards, how are they organized, what are specific standards in the Common Core State Standards. Truthfully, that's not going to help teachers really understand how it's going to impact their teaching. What we recommend is that as you do your professional development, you focus on the big ideas of the standards. And think about those things rather than trying to atomize it into little bits. In fact, the standards writers themselves talk about that looking at individual standards is a meaningless activity. You've got to look at kind of the bigger picture and see how the standards progress, how they grow, and how they build upon each other. Same thing will hold true in science. Many school leaders would characterize themselves as, I'm not a mathematics person. They weren't mathematics teachers. When they grew up and became school administrators, they don't necessarily feel that mathematics teaching is their strength. But in order to understand how to support high-quality mathematics instruction in their building, they need to know about what high-quality mathematics instruction is and how to support it. The other piece that we think would be really helpful is for principals not to think that they have to do it all. You've got good leadership in your building. Build strong teams as you think about the Common Core state standards for mathematics. And think about how to utilize the leadership in your building as you do your implementation. Well, surprise, surprise, the same things will apply in science as well. When we talk about pitfalls in leadership, one of the pitfalls we see is trying to overlay generic tools for teacher observation, even good ones, on mathematics classrooms. Principals and school leaders need good tools that are really mathematics specific in order for them to understand what to look for in high quality instruction and how to help engage teachers in discussions about improving student learning. That will hold true in science as well. But another pitfall already was addressed by Rachel, and that is the notion, particularly in the elementary grades, that science is getting squeezed out. And well, we're speaking to the choir. In terms of policies, the Common Core state standards for mathematics are really built on a foundation of equity. In fact, that's really the motivation for the Common Core state standards for mathematics. It's not just fewer, clearer, higher. It's fewer, clearer, higher for everybody. And so one way to think about the equity in mathematics is to look at which kids have access to which kinds of mathematics instruction. And if everyone is supposed to be preparing for college readiness, which is one of the goals of the new standards, then making sure that all students have access to instruction that's going to prepare them in that way is really critical. So looking inside and looking which students have access to good high-quality instruction is important. And you'll have the same issue with science. The other piece in science, however, as you think about STEM and the next generation science standards, is being smart about career and technical education. An important element of STEM is this connection to career readiness, as Rachel talked about. But that has to rest upon a strong foundation of science and mathematics knowledge. So don't equate your career and technical education necessarily as a substitute for good science instruction. One of the issues that people are going to have to grapple with is when you make your expectations higher, what do you do with kids who are underprepared? And one of the strategies that people think about doing a lot is to slow it down. We'll spread algebra over 2 years as opposed to 1 year. For kids who are behind in mathematics, it doesn't make sense that they're going to catch up if you slow them down. So we recommend that you think about intensification strategy and other strategies that don't involve slowing down instruction. As the expectations go higher, you've got to figure out ways to provide more time and resources and alternatives that are going to intensify instruction for students. We'll just move on. Adoption processes are important. Instructional materials are important. But a lot of people think the solution to their mathematics problems may reside in new materials. Whatever new materials you get, we hope they're good ones, but whatever they are, make sure that you don't forget that teachers are going to need a lot of support to use them well and as intended. And the same thing will happen in science. Particularly in the world of the internet where it's easy to pull down resources, one of the pitfalls is to think that teachers have the ability to develop their own curricula and instructional materials. And in mathematics and science, that's really hard to do beyond doing individual lessons. It takes a lot of expertise and understanding to develop good, coherent materials. same thing happens in science. So those were our set of recommendations. Read the reg one.